Hi, I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections, and today I'm going to take you through the process of repairing a rotted window sash. So this explanation of repairing a window sash is not supposed to be a full how-to guide on how you would repair a rotted window sash, but rather a discussion of a lot of the steps involved and a further discussion on repair versus replacement. As home inspectors, when we come across a lot of these types of conditions, we'll often say have it repaired or replaced, but we won't say which, because we like to leave it up to the person who's going to be doing the work to decide whether you're better off having a component repaired or replaced. In this particular case, this is a window sash at my own house. I knew that the bottom portion of it was rotted when I was buying this house. It wasn't severely rotted, but it was at the point where when it's a casement window or a crank out window. It's the type where you need to crank it and then it slowly closes it. The hardware started coming loose as I was closing it right when I was buying the house. So I knew that this was something I was going to have to deal with in the future. It was a window that had a lot of heavy black staining on it. There was condensation going on at all of the windows in my house. There was a humidifier that was probably cranked up a lot during the winter time. The HRV was never run. The shades were likely closed all the time. And then to top it off, there was no gutters. So it probably saw a lot of water from the outside too. It's like everything you could possibly do to make the lower portion of a window start to rot out. So that's what we had here, and I knew I'd have to deal with it. My short-term solution for this was I took the screws out of the hardware and I put in larger screws. And that held it for, probably about a year or two. But then it got to the point this spring where I went to open the window, I went to close it again or something, and the hardware just kind of fell right out. I mean, the screws ripped right out of the lower sash as I was trying to close the window. And I said, all right, that's it. I got to deal with this now. No more putting this project off. So I'll share with you my process. I started by taking the sash out of the window opening. Not that difficult. There's a couple little retaining clips, couple screws you take out, and then you basically just slide the thing out of place and pop it out. So I took it out. I knew this project was going to take several days, so I got a whole bunch of heavy 6mm poly sheeting and a whole bunch of painter's tape and a whole bunch of duct tape. And I used a combination of all that stuff to seal my window opening shut. I made sure that I had my 100-pound German Shepherd dog, Sarge, at home the entire time that this project would be going on, because my house is not extremely secure with a little bit of poly in the window opening. I did a good job of taping it to help make sure that when it rains, no water would get in. Although I will say my gutter does a pretty good job of making sure no water even touches this window anymore now. But so I covered up the opening, did a good job of that, and started the repair project by bringing the sash into my garage. I took off all of the existing hardware. And as you can see in this picture, it's pretty nasty. It's pretty rotted at the bottom. The rot was a lot worse than I thought it was. At first, I thought I might be able to just cut up a few wooden dowels and fit them into some new drill holes that I was going to make. But once I got all the hardware off, I could see we were way past that. There was a lot more rot than that, and I knew it was going to be more extensive. So I took all the hardware off, and then I set up a jig with a bunch of blocks of wood and a clamping straight edge. And doing this jig work took a long time. Probably took me about an hour setup for 2 different cuts, where I took my circular saw and I cut out a big rotted section of the window. And I wanted these cuts to be perfectly straight. I wanted them in the exact location, and I don't trust myself to hold a circular saw that straight. I don't think most people can hold the circular saw that perfectly. So I had all these jigs set up, so once I actually made the cut takes like 30 seconds for both cuts, but all the rest of the work was prepping to make sure they were perfect cuts. And then I finished them off using a multi-tool. It's a tool that just kind of vibrates a blade and helps to make a little bit more precise cuts. So I cut out all the rotted section. Next, I used a wood restorer kit by Abatron, where it's basically this two-part epoxy. You mix this stuff together, you stir it all up, you let it sit, and then you paint it on all of the remaining wood. And it's supposed to restore any rotted wood, even wood that's like crumbling. You paint this stuff on there and it turns it into steel, essentially. They don't claim that. Those are my words. But it restores any type of wood with damage. So I went to town on the remaining wood, the exposed wood on the window sash, to get that all covered up, and then I just let it sit. So I let that sit overnight. Next, I used a table saw and a planer to basically mill new wood to fill the existing gap that I had created and to create a new strip along the bottom. Now, I could have gotten away with just using a table saw, but you gotta be really precise with this stuff. And you know, I happened to get this planer recently and I really wanted an excuse to use it, to be honest. So it was kind of nice to use a planer and just pass the wood through once, twice, 3 times, taking off just the slightest little bit on each side and making it perfectly square. So it was kind of fun using the planer for this project. But I got the wood all exactly perfect, and then I let the window set overnight with the epoxy to make sure it properly hardened. The next morning, I got to town by taking the new pieces of wood, using a bunch of wood glue and stainless steel screws, and I fastened all of the wood in place. And then I used, same manufacturer, Abatron, they make this, this wood putty. And it's basically a 2-part epoxy putty where you mix these 2 putties together, you form it, you let it sit for a while, and then you use that as wood filler. I think it's a lot stronger product than wood filler. It's really made for repairing wood. Some people will use Bondo for this type of project, but I prefer to use something that's made just for use with wood. So I use that to fill in all the little gaps that my blocks of wood didn't cover. And I went nuts with it because I knew I'd have to do a lot of sanding. So I was generous, and then I let that sit overnight. Day 3, I got a sander out and I sanded everything down, got it all super smooth, made all the profiles match and make it all nice and beautiful. And then I put a coat of paint on it. And I did that in the morning. I happened to have matching paint. When I first got this house, all of the windows were pretty black and stained, and it was natural wood, but it did not look good. And to make it look nice, I ended up having a painter come in and paint, well, like sand down and paint all of the wood, all of the sashes, everything. The windows all look brand new now, even though they're 20 years old. And thankfully, I have the matching paint. So I didn't have to repaint the entire sash. All I had to do was paint the stuff that I had messed with and that my sander touched. So I had matching paint. I was able to paint everything, put a coat on in the morning, and then in the evening I put another coat on, let it sit there overnight, and then by day 4 it was pretty much finished and ready to go. All I had to do was put the new hardware on the bottom of the sash and then pop it back in the window opening. And today you can't tell that anything was ever done. I mean, even if you look closely, you probably can't tell. If you look really closely, you can see where you've got some old wood and new wood, but it is so tough to tell. Nobody's ever gonna know. And I happen to have some like really fancy wood, like Brazilian walnut or something like that sitting in my garage, just a tiny little stick that fit in there perfectly. I don't know what I would have ever done with it. So maybe you could say it's wasteful. I probably should have just used plain old pine, but I've got some really hard wood in there too. So I know these screws aren't ever coming out of this sash again. So that was the repair project from start to finish. Took me, well, you know, not 4 full days, but it was a total of 4 days to get this done. Probably about 5 to 6 hours of work. It involved a lot of tools. I mean, you know, sanders, handsaw, multi-tool, table saw, planer, not that I needed the planer, and the painting, and it was a lot of stuff involved. So if I had hired a carpenter to do this for me, I suspect they would have just taken the sash and brought it to their house and then, you know, kind of did the same thing I did with the window opening. But if they had to do it on site, oh my goodness, so many tools that would have had to been brought out. I mean, this, I think, clearly would have been a better replacement project. It would have been better to replace the sash than repair it like I did. But there's something to be said for the satisfaction of repairing your own home. You couldn't hire me to do this on anybody else's house, but I kind of enjoy doing the work when it's done on my own house. But again, the whole point of this is that this is why home inspectors say have this repaired or replaced, because unless we're the ones doing the work, we don't want to make that call. We'll leave it up to the person who's actually doing the work. That's it. Thanks for watching my tale. Hope you enjoyed learning how some of this process works. Take care.